On the southernmost side of Panama, the highway runs out and the mountains begin. Rather than taking a hike, I sold my vehicle and took a boat. I entered Colombia with a valid passport but did not pay a visit to migration. 3 months later, after losing the passport and receiving word of a sickness in the family, I decided to return home. I turned myself over to the police and told them, "Look, I was robbed in your country and do not have identification. My grandfather is very sick, I need to go home, and you're going to hell." I was then deported from Colombia. They handed me a card that stated, "You are now deported from Colombia," assisted me in contacting the U.S. Embassy, and 2 weeks later I received a free temporary passport. My family purchased tickets online and I spent New Year's Day 2010 on airplanes returning to the U.S. I walked into my family's house and the only survivor of his generation looked at me through half-closed eyes. 12 hours later, after fighting death for almost a full month, perhaps holding out until my return, my grandfather passed away. I then returned to the border with the temporary passport in hand, spent the entire year in Mexico, and wrote the first 18 pages of my book, including the final page. That fall in Acapulco, I met a young hippie couple selling hand jewelry and temporary tattoos. We became friends and made a trade. English for him, French for her, and a nice wooden pipe for me. Like myself, they were traveling south on the west coast, and we lightly discussed the idea of traveling together, but the next day, I continued alone. A few days later, I ran into that same couple in Puerto Escondido. I told them that the pipe was stolen by the police and they gave me another, for free. The three of us then spent the night on the beach, smoking the herb of the earth and discussing the stories from my book. Around 4 a.m. they went to sleep and I went for a walk. I spent the rest of the morning wandering the streets of the touristy town talking to myself. I had been selling copies of my books for $2 to $3 and having a hard time finding people who had 20 pesos at the moment that I happened to be passing by. That morning I asked for help in finding a way to distribute the information even more economically. After sunrise, the help found me. A light-skinned, English-speaking young man saw me selling one of my books and called me to him. I explained that I was creating something that would tear down the walls of communication and revolutionize the world, and he explained to me that he was a Catholic priest, directly ordained by the Pope after seeing Jesus during a near-death experience. He then read my book, found the needed 3 points of light, and ordained my mission as being blessed by God and supported by the Church. Now here I would like to say something. It matters not what your beliefs are regarding the personified God and Jesus and the devil and whatnot of organized religions. As far as I'm concerned, when I pray, it might really just be my conscious talking to my subconscious, which is connected to the higher conscious, which is connected to everything else. And I do believe that the Catholic Church has always been one of the greatest tools used by the man to oppress and control the people. However, I agree with Socrates. As for me, all I know is that I know nothing. None of that really matters because the prayer was simply to help me find a way to get the information to people who had very little to no money. And during the next few weeks, while Michael and I traveled together, I gained the idea of using flyers to collect donations and promote my website. About 2 months before this, I had created MajorMigraine.com and had already posted for free my collection of PDF ebooks. I now had flyers that could be copied for less than a penny and given away for whatever donation. I had eliminated my overhead and become a professional bum. A quick cute story. One night while we were sharing a hotel room, Michael had already fallen asleep and I was awake on my own bed. I became bored with the TV and began flipping through the dial. I passed a movie channel but continued surfing up the list. A few clicks higher, I paused for a second and heard a female voice saying, No, go back downstairs and watch a movie." Dutifully, I departed down the dial to the presentation that was playing and returned to my bed to write and reflect. At one point I had the thought, look, if this is all destiny and it's all written in the stars, then why do I have to keep making all these prayers? And a woman spoke to me from the TV saying, well, because you're part of it too, silly. During this time traveling with Michael, a reading of the Chinese Yi Jing declared us as two dragons fighting in the meadow. Their blood is black and yellow. I'll let you come up with your own definition of the colors, but let me explain the fight. We were both very strongly opinionated with very different opinions. Michael and I were constantly at each other's throats, often teetering on the brink of physical violence. At one point, while hitchhiking near Chimpancinco, we were dropped off at a large gas station. He decided he wanted to walk. Then a half a block later, he stops and sticks out his thumb. "This is stupid," I pleaded. "Let's go back to the gas station and find a ride." "No," he exclaimed. "When I have a plan, I follow it to the end." I walked from the side of the road and began screaming at the top of my lungs. "God, why do I always have to work with the stupidest people in the world? These egotistical idiots that think they are smart and never listen to anyone else." Michael had once informed me that he has the voice of God in his head, so I suddenly stopped screaming. Standing a good 30 feet away, I quietly stated, "Look, just tell him to tell me that we're going to split up, and that he will contact me when the new documents are ready." Immediately, I heard the sound of my friend's voice. "Dude, we're just going to split up for now. I'll send you an email when I have your passport." I returned to the gas station and was given a lift by the first person I asked. As we passed, my hard-headed companion was nowhere to be seen. In January 2011, I was picked up by Mexican immigration and experienced my second deportation. But this time I got to sit around for 2 weeks, eating too much food, watching movies, and playing Mario Brothers.